You get the fluent taste out of it. That's the thing. So now, what got you started into music? That's the question. As far as blues, if you play blues the whole time, or is it?
No, not really. Yeah.
What'd you start out with?
I guess, being a teenager of the 90s, kind of started out with the grunge stuff, Nirvana, and
Okay.
all that. Probably like...
Say where that came from, right?
Yeah, right. So I think the first songs I learned were off like the first or second Nirvana album, and I think really your friends get you into it. The people you hang out with, people you play with. It's
It's kind of still that way today. Like our friends, like your friends will listen, and they get really inspired by it. It's like, man, check this out, and then it kind of leads from there. You get interested, interested or introduced to the Nirvana, or you get introduced to like Cypress Hill, depending on who's listening to what.
right.
You kind of take all the dynamics in of everybody around you.
Yeah, and then also the more as you spend time together, it becomes like what you do with each other. You know what I mean? So it's kind of turns into something. It's constructive, but you really get into it, I think, because it's like the good part of peer pressure. You have fun doing it, you make friends doing it, and so you want to keep doing it.
Exactly, yeah. And if you have somebody who's in your group who's well-rounded with music, it's like they're checking out different things, especially now. I mean, with the internet being the way it is, you have a full array of anything you could ever want, whether it be rap, country, there's so many things.
It's almost like too much. It's hard to find new stuff because you gotta there's so much out there.
It is. And then just like the playlist today and stuff that we listen to, you can go through a playlist. Like if you want a country playlist, you can go through 100 different country artists.
Right.
Half of them you never heard.
Yeah.
You know that.
Right.
And it kind of snowballs from there. And then sometimes you get a playlist that's, you have country artists, rock, blues, somebody who makes a really cool playlist with all these different great artists, and then you get started on things.
Yeah. I think the grunge stuff kind of started out as a kid and then got me into like Neil Young and then that was, hooked on that for a long time, and then that gets you into everything else, so.
And that took you back to blues as far as get back to Neil Young and then doing...
Well, I think that kind of, used to play a lot of Dead and Almonds and stuff as a kid, and then probably from the Allman Brothers kind of, a lot of that get you interested in slide and interested in
Greg Allman
blues, but I think also some of the blues stuff just comes from living here, because that's one of those gigs that's around here. It's a neat, we live in a neat town that there's some cool bands out there, and there's a little bit of everything. There's some folky people and there's some rock people, but with having the Blues Fest here and all of that, there's kind of a call for it. So if you want to get out and play, it's like, well, these are the people looking, so you pick it up.
And plus the direct connect to Memphis and Nashville, the contest, the International Blues Competition, and all that definitely comes into play around here. I mean, Williamsport is a big player in that. Yeah. Which rightfully so. I mean, there's like you said, a ton of killer musicians for that.
And great guitar players too. And so I know for me, I'm more into the songwriting, and so there's kind of the guitar gigs you can pick up are a little separate from doing your own thing and trying to write, is a little different from kind of being a guitar player in a band. But there's so many great guitar players in town, that it's a neat place to live if you want to just be able to go out and see somebody play. So. And
plus, like you say, working with all them, you're all kind of on the same mindset. And not only that, you know what you're doing, but it's also inspiring to work with all these different ones. Oh, yeah.
Right. Some of those guys that, that eat it up all day, that can, I think a sharp musician who's busy every day, so on their game that the stuff just comes out of them more automatically. So.
Yeah, and then you meet them, play with them, and then they're showing you. You start talking shop like we did, and you start learning different things, which is the beauty of it. If you don't have an ego and you just kind of just work with each other, it's like you can come up with something really cool.
Yeah. Yep.
Definitely. And then also you're a teacher with autism now, which is takes the utmost patience and everything, which I have the utmost respect for. But
no, it's actually a lot of fun. Most people's jobs. Most jobs are the same thing every day, know, and with teaching, if you're having a rough day, the kids are fun. You know what I mean? Like the job itself is the thing that the job is the fun part. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're having a rough day, so you get to just go out and play kickball at recess. Like, who else can say that?
Yeah, no doubt.
So
keeps it light, keeps it fun.
Yeah. So.
But like you said, and how you go about doing that. Like I said, I don't know how much you can say about this, but a lot of people don't know on. Like I said, I didn't know on how you actually learn to teach and interact with them, which is very interesting. I don't know how much you can say about that.
Well, I mean, it's every child is so different, and so but you start with figuring out, getting to know your students and what they love and what their motivators are, and then you kind of build lessons around what makes the kid tick and what they want. And, I wouldn't trade it for a desk job or a cash register job or anything else. So
and like you said, it's a ton of patience, but you know how to do it. Did you have training before to get into this, or is this something you had a passion for and just went and did?
I started to work in the field first, and then went back to school for it. Because,
you did? Okay.
Yeah, because I liked it. And so started. I had some odd jobs and stuff, and then kind of just started. So.
Oh, you just kind of learned as you went to get into it? Because I know you taught at Turbeville, and you did elementary. Am I correct?
Yeah. But that was after school and stuff. It's a long trip from playing music to working regular jobs to trying this and that, and then once I took a job in the field of like human services and education, like that, so I went back to school.
Yeah, so, but you had a passion for Did you go to school for being a teacher before that to get that? Or
no, but it was always something I was into, considered. So.
Oh, okay. So you had a background and just built from there, and and then just saw doing what you're doing now. That was it was just the right time, right place. You got into it, and
I think so.
That's really cool. Like I said, it's got to take a lot of patience. Like you said, there's a lot of things you got to know what to do. And obviously patience and knowing how to work with them to understand how to communicate with them. That was a very interesting part. What you brought up to me, their communication skills verbally are not there, right? That's what you're saying. You're doing it more through sign language, and you have to know that, and not only know that, but know how to get them to talk to you with that, right?
Right, and the kids, the kids teach you. If it's not working, they'll let you know. And so they, if you, every school is, if it's a place where the kids are engaged and having fun, and then everybody makes progress, and so
so not being strict and just really communicating with them on a level that they're comfortable with, and then you bring that in, and they're able to trust you and kind of talk to you. It's very interesting. Like I said, nobody ever talks about this. I know people that have done it, but they've never gone into great detail on how they do it and how they interact.
Well, there's a lot smarter people than me that who could probably explain it better, but you got to get them in here, I guess. So.
What else do we have? Like I said, we need cameras out on the porch. We have a great conversation going. We come in here in front of the camera, and now we're screwed.
That's true. It's all there's evidence in here.
Yes.
So out there, you relax. Right here, you're in the hot seat.
Yeah. So just don't worry about that thing. That's half the battle.
I'm just checking out the painting. So.
Oh yeah. He said they're great artists. Jinx, and then Ashley Elliott. It's amazing what they do with this stuff.
Yeah.
The line we have between art and music.
Right. And I can imagine there's got to be a process of you see it, and then as you get the colors and the shapes down, you have to guide it to be what you see, but also work with what's there. It must be quite a process. So.
It's kind of the same principle for us. I'm sure like when you write a song, I mean, there's always that that moment of inspiration, which I'm sure happens for them too. You just have that moment, and you grab the guitar or whatever instrument you're feeling, or
Yeah.
just your voice, lyrics. You write it down, and then that's the beginning process for us.
Right.
Like I said, I can't speak for what they do, but
If you get lucky, some of it comes quick, and then some material comes quick and all together and all at once, and then others you get kind of a sense of the shape, and then you got to slave at those over time.
yep,
You know, a little bit of taking out a weak word and putting in a strong one, and so some, you know, I'm sure it's the same with the art. Like some songs take years, and others sometimes 2 or 3 pop out on the same day, and then you have some that are in a notebook sitting that take forever. You know?
yeah. And that's the one thing that scientists can't truly find is the part in our brain that is inspiration, like how.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I do, we all create differently. Like you said, we might have 3 songs in one day. You might have no songs for months because you're busy working on something else. Or you're not in the right mindset. Yeah, I messed that up. But then that moment hits, and you're capturing everything, and you're just killing it. And then it goes away, it comes back.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing they truly can't find.
Right. I think the more you do it, the easier it gets to find things that take you there.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the neat thing about the visual art is, you know, that world around you that's so full of color and shape, and being able to take something that other people might just see a face or just see people.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the artist puts so much of their own
Personality into
right,
it.
like their perspective on it.
Yeah,
You know, like
yeah.
just the color you can kind of, it implies what that mood of that work is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been into for some reason since the quarantines and stuff, I've been curious about like local history stuff.
Mhm.
So because there's a lot of neat Pennsylvania ghost stories, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so those are cool.
Especially Centralia, which is
Right,
near the
yeah.
area you grew up in. So
Yeah. And then
it's-
throw some minor chords under it, and you get a cool spooky old story song. That's been kind of cool lately,
yeah,
you know, to try to take stuff like that and try to figure out how to fit it into a song. So,
yeah, storytelling, which is
Yeah.
definite hardest. But the country has that nailed down to a science.
yeah, they do. Yeah,
And it's definitely bled off into every genre that we've ever listened to. I mean, the storytelling, you know, came off into rock and roll as we know it, and jazz has always been its own thing. That's, you know, that as well as I do. That's always a touchy subject with every musician. It's like jazz, like, oh well, you know, that's its own thing.
You know.
Either you're gonna love it or hate it.
if you can, those musicians can speak without words. You know, like
Yeah,
there's times when the emotions in the music and words would just screw it up.
it's
You
true.
know?
Yeah,
You know, and just to take chords and melodies and stuff and have it be that emotional is it's pretty impressive. So
you're right on that, and that I think that bled through to a lot of music too, because there's certain parts of a song, like if you have a break, like Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean,
yeah.
that there's when they're not singing and they're doing those breakdowns and speaking.
yeah,
There's words that you couldn't sing a melody across that. There's no way in hell it wouldn't work.
right.
And like Tool, I mean, you could go across every genre that has done something like that. And
Yeah.
you brought up a good point. I mean, you couldn't put a melody line across those breakdowns or these intervals that they've done.
Yeah.
It wouldn't fit.
Or even with albums, like with a whole album, you know, 45, 50 minutes worth of music.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want somebody yapping in your ear for a whole hour? You know, so like those
True.
parts of an album that might have, you know, an instrumental song like Little Martha by the Allman Brothers or something
Yeah.
that just pops in,
Yep.
Embryonic Journey by Jefferson Airplane, you know, that has that place on the album where it's like your ear gets to take a breath. You know,
Yeah.
you just have a little 2 or 3 minutes of emotion, and then you're ready for whatever's next in the journey of the album. You know,
That's a good point. Yeah, like Pink Floyd, all
Right.
those big albums that we know and love that were produced back then.
yeah,
You know, we probably couldn't do that today without people getting bored, but we still listen back to those like, that was really good. And you
Yeah.
didn't realize, like, oh, there was, 2 minutes in there was no vocals and there was nothing, but it took
Yeah.
you on this long journey of,
right.
like, yeah,
Great gig in the sky and stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah, definitely helps. I don't know, it's being slightly lost today, but even still, I mean, there's certain, I mean, we probably kind of condensed it a little bit. There's certain songs that have those breakdowns that,
Yeah.
that are not going to have the vocals, but they're going to have that music that just carries you to the next part. It's like, oh yeah, I'm here, but
Right.
which helps.
And it's probably out there. It's just there's just so much music now that you kind of have to find somebody you like and then see who they like and who they play with, and then you find, I like to look at local stuff too, because if you're gonna listen, why not find out what's really going on all around? Being in a town like this, so
It
that's
is
fun too. Yeah.
That's a good attitude to have. A lot of people don't have that. They just kind of stick to their. I've kind of noticed with like our generation is not. There's kind of split, but the generation before us, they're very much, and go further back, they're very much stuck in their musical taste. And it's been proven by science that in your 30s, your mind gets locked into the music, or even earlier, sometimes 25, 22. I mean, you get locked into that style, and that's all you listen to the rest of your life. It doesn't change. You don't continue to learn and grow. But if you kind of throw that aside and keep listening, if you kind of keep your mind open to things,
Right.
it's the same with any artwork, writing, any of that. If you kind of open up your mind to what's somebody else is doing that's current,
Right.
it's really a neat experience.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, speaking of jazz, like an artist like Miles Davis, who, just totally changed what he was doing every once in a while. I don't know how you'd be that lifelong learner, and totally go in a different direction. But I guess you just got to be young at heart or something.
Yeah. It's either that or you just kind of, well, I'm sure it's like producers too. I mean, I've never talked about this much, but every generation has, you have a handful of producers that really push. That's, I mean, the record industry, thank goodness, is kind of going away. It's kind of it's the yin and the yang. Like you said, there's so much music out there,
Yeah.
but there's no record company anymore to help do that. So we're kind of left to our own device. It used to be, how it was years ago. The record company, you had so many people to a record label,
Yeah.
and only so many of those artists got pushed for promotion.
Right.
So they were the ones that made it big. If they had the right connections and they were writing these songs and working with these producers, they were getting, the top level, and then the ones that below that and below that,
Yeah.
and like we were saying about touring. But nowadays it's getting, like you said, more artists, but the touring end of it, that's kind of gone to the wayside a little bit. There's festivals that showcase all these bands, and it's kind of been the progression of it. We've lost that big promotion of these handful of producers, these record companies, and these bands that are on top of the world and everybody else is below them. Now we're coming more to a level playing field, which is kind of a cool thing. But like you said, almost oversaturated, but it's like we have the experience to listen to a ton of different stuff.
Yeah, and people get to. It's much easier to kind of have a creative space that's yours, that at home, or a place you could set up and be comfortable and just follow every little idea, until you get there, and then you can get connected directly to people with less. I think there was that middleman that used to be out there. That was a way for people to have a resource. So that, it was probably a good thing. And it's a little harder to not have something like that out there. But if you can, those folks that are out there doing it themselves, even at, you can find those people just like you can find anything online. And so I think there's probably for as much as we've all been cooped up since March, hopefully, in the next year or two, we see a lot of good creative work comes out of the ideas that people, followed while to cure their cabin fever. And so, and then with even, my daughter, when she's looking for music, she finds music on YouTube, and she's into, certain types of singers and songs. And so she kind of can use that algorithm to kind of find who these people listen to. And so it's so different from, you're not going to the mall and fishing through, like whatever, 500 or 1,000 CDs are in that record store. That's all, back then. And now it's, she can find one artist that she really likes, just this one song, and then find out that artist's other material. And it's kind of like what used to take us years of exploration, you could do in a second if you now. So I think it's like a literacy skill, being able to follow through with all of that.
And like you said,
music.
Back in our day too, you brought up a good point in the beginning, is that friends would share with friends. Like now, I'm sure they still do. I like I said, I don't know if your kids have ever said anything, like if their friends ever send them anything.
Oh, they do. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of the same principle of what we went through back in the day. We get
the mixtapes and stuff.
Yeah, we get mixtapes, or somebody get a CD from their friend down in Georgia or out in California. It's like, man, you got to check out this band. These guys are awesome. And then that's how they grew. Yeah. But now it's kind of the same thing. We're just sending it. It's just a different way. We're just on Messenger. I send you this.
Yeah.
Dude, check this guy out. He's playing a similar style to what you're doing. He's really killing it. Or he's playing this jazz beat. You got to check this dude out.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I think it's on us to nobody wants their books or their music or their TV to be, what they watch and to be handed to them. You kind of want to find what you like, and so it's kind of on us to go out and see what's out there. I think there's more out there than ever. It's just got to go look for it,
Yeah, yeah.
So,
like I said, you brought up a good point. You're dealing with an algorithm that essentially, when you start playing this song, here's all these artists you like, but sometimes they're a little bit too similar.
Yeah.
You got to kind of break away from that for a minute and go just kind of find something else. But once you start, like you said, once you start finding all these different artists, then the playlists become more broad. It's like, and then they start bringing up these other artists.
It reminds me of, the 50s and 60s, and when music was mostly 45s and singles, and that was the market. And so then you'd have a hit, and then you'd have follow-ups to the hit where some song would be huge. So these companies would put their songwriters on, like, make me 3 songs just like that hit.
Yeah.
So then you'd get follow-ups that were like kind of copycat what they and so I think that's always been part of music, where like there's clones.
Yeah.
But if you get outside of that top 40 thing, and
you bring up a good point. Like the 50s and 60s, the 50s definitely had a lot of similar artists.
Yeah.
60s I think was a little bit more broad, but the 70s, there's some times where I think it had to do with, like you said, a lot to do with the songwriting and a lot to do with the producers who were on the other end of that.
Right.
But like sometimes you can't tell the difference between I wouldn't say foreign, like Bad Company and something else. There's a similar tone between all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some that just obviously started. You had Black Sabbath, you had Led Zeppelin, and Jimi Hendrix toward the end of his career.
Yeah.
But there's a tone there and a producing that was very much similar.
Yeah.
And their voices, I mean, there'd be a little bit touch in the voice, but you could tell the production through that whole 70s era was very much similar.
Mm-hmm.
They're still great. I mean, you had great songwriting, you had great bands, but the production and everything, am I wrong on this? Did you hear the same similar tone through that era?
I think a lot of, like the visual artists, their medium affects the product, so like if it's like an artist that's working in watercolor might have a certain set of contrasts or might have a certain set of textures, versus pastels or oil or versus a sculpture. And I think like as the technology, like music is as old as civilization, but then as technology has come along and as markets have changed, the music's changed. And so like when you look at like 78 records that could only be 3 minutes long, so then you had artists that had to jam their whole idea into 3 minutes, and you had 2.5 minutes and that's your song. And then once that changed, you could let like bebop artists like Charlie Parker and stuff, like they had to jam these little songs into that time. And then once the LP came along, all of a sudden you get like Miles Davis and you get Kind of Blue and you get a record with 8 songs on the whole record, because he doesn't have to, he can now expand because the medium expanded. Like the technology to share that music grew, You know, so instead of having to only write a 3-minute piece where everything was fast and jammed in, now he could have these long, 7 or 8 minute songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then like like Jimi Hendrix, as they start to, or like the Beatles start being able to use the studio as an instrument, so like you have Beatles songs where they're actually sticking their fingers on the tape reels and slowing them down and causing flange sounds and getting things in and out of sync, and so that changed the music again, having going from one track to multiple tracks to like then you up to Pink Floyd, and then sampling in the 80s, and then as hip hop and stuff, and now computers make anything possible. So it's
true, yeah, because you can emulate anything, any sound all the way back to the beginning of this now with new sounds that they're adding into it.
Which makes the judgment that much more important, because if you could do anything you want, what do you do? It's like you could take that technology and overdo it. So like now the artist still has to make those judgments of how do I use this to sound good and not just use it to I don't know.
And part of that's a part of their inspiration too. I mean, if you walk in there with a song in your head and start messing around with something, sometimes you come up with something cool. Sometimes like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do?
Right. Yeah.
There's always that element of it too. Sometimes you think it's a great idea. It's like, and then you get done. It's like, oh. Yeah. Then other times you go in and you nail that idea and it becomes something so big that's unreal.
Yeah. And it's cool that you can. I would hope that when we come out of this COVID slump and stuff, we find that people that took advantage of this 6 months and a year and had their setup and their space and were able to get creative, and we find that I wouldn't be surprised if we found that music takes another like a left turn, and that 20, 30 years from now people look back at music from before this and music after this, but something changes now.
You get a good point on that, because we've had plenty of time to sit down and really write and hone in our craft as far as being at home and this actual songwriting, the production. And today you have another good point you brought up is that we can file share. Yeah. I can sit here and record something, send it to a sound engineer, send it to a producer, send it to a guitar player. He can lay down a track underneath it, send it back to me. You have that connection to where with downtime you have plenty of time to just go back and forth. Right. And like I said, really perfect the craft. So we really might see, that's a good point, by 2021 we might see some crazy things that have been recorded and might hopefully blow our minds. So I'd be cool with that.
If Bon Iver can write a record in a cabin with all self-produced, hopefully we get hundreds of those.
Wait, who's this? I didn't hear about
Bon Iver. I guess I might even be saying the name wrong, but just it's some of those artists like the Nick Drake type artists that don't really sound like anybody else, like just kind of do their own thing for their own reason. Yeah. And so I don't know, those are some of the neat artists that I think from across eras that don't really try to sound like anybody. Like a Neil Young type, his voice is so strange. He couldn't sound like anybody if he tried. Yeah. So he had no choice but to just do his thing,
Until he hops on the guitar with Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Yeah. Well, great singers though, right?
Yeah, and he hops on them, but their dynamic changed with him too. I got off to the subject, but you were saying they went out to a cabin and recorded this all on their own? Yeah. I did not know anything about this, but
yeah, I can't think of the name of any of the records, but there's kind of that, like the band, like the band from way back. They had their studio that was kind of their clubhouse, and it's a little different when it's your space and you kind of hunker down and shut out the world and just do what you want at your pace, and then you don't. And then I think that's when, like the Beatles with Apple Studio, like that's when the studio itself becomes an instrument, and things sound really unique. Yeah. And you got to be like, for artists that, I guess it's also different for artists that are always on tour and are really sharp, and can just jump into the studio, like a Stevie Ray Vaughan type who is so tight with what they do that they can just press play and catch it, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
But for mere mortals, who can't just pull all that stuff out impulsively,
Right.
That's I think being able to I think that's how the technology lately, it probably influences what comes out lately, is that somebody can have a spot within their lifestyle where they go and that's their creative place, and they can multi-track and get their own ideas down. And
yeah, they have time and they have comfort, and there's no outside pressure.
Right. You're not watching the clock and thinking, oh, it's another $90 if I stay here any longer.
That's a good point too. Yeah,
Right.
It does give us a freedom, but it's also the same thing. It's like I don't know how most of them are, but like the sound engineering, that's a very wide thing that's overlooked. Those guys have the biggest. Next to the drummer, like I said, I always give the drummer in the band. They have the worst freaking job in the world. Poor guys. But the sound engineer, man, that's years of training and a lot of work. And the thing about it is, when you work with one or and producers too. I mean, they have this. They have an understanding of sound engineering. They can do a lot,
right?
But they have more of the ear. There's a lot of elements that combine with that. And then at a studio, where, like you said, there's a comfort level. You have time, but you're also looking at the clock too,
right.
Like how we are. It's like, man, I got to spend this amount of money, so you got to come in prepared.
Right.
But you also got to not rush anything and not be looking at the clock to it. There's that fine line and balance.
Yeah. Well, and it'd be nice to have the best of both worlds, of course. But a real studio, I think that's one of the places where hopefully the technology can, it's almost like a journal, to write at home, to record at home.
Yes.
You get those ideas down, but then what you can do with, a home setup it's like painting with fewer colors,
Right.
When you really get out there to a nice studio and they have nice preamps and nice mics and a real engineer that, then you're opening up the whole spectrum of dynamics and sounds. And I think that's one of the places where even, everybody's all about earbuds now and headphones. And it's almost like,
yep.
I mean, yes, it sounds great that the music shuts out the world and it's just you and the music, but you also are missing
the broad spectrum.
Right, this whole spectrum of frequencies and sound. It's like that you really don't get from just that little thing, no matter how close you put it to your eardrum. You're not, it's different than when you put on a record and you lay on the couch and you're shaking the walls and your neighbors are mad, but and you're like totally absorbed in it, and you get the low lows and the high highs. And so I think there's
a dynamic loss there, it is, so to speak. Yeah.
There's the creative spaces that you need to come up with the ideas, but then those great artists that can take that to the studio and really deliver.
Bring it to life. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, the dynamics were, like I said, it was kind of fun to watch when, just in the middle of all this, before the streaming thing happened, and when it caught my attention, and it probably happened before this. They probably weren't the first band to do this, but what I realized is when Red Hot Chili Peppers released The Getaway, and this was only 3-4 years ago, maybe more. They did 2 separate mixes. They did one for the WAV file, which would be your CDs that you listen to, a mastering for that CD. Mm-hmm. But they also they had another person mix the same album for just MP3 and all the other digital devices. And I could hear, I listened to both, and I was like, wow, okay, I see what, this makes sense. Like I said, there's a dynamic loss between that CD and the typical stuff we listen to, whether it be a laptop, with a phone, pad. You kind of, there's a loss there, but like you said, there's a convenience. I mean, how many times do we both do it? I mean, if you hit your phone, that's where you're going to go to first.
Yeah, and you don't want to forget something, so you get it down there. And,
exactly.
And that's such an advantage.
It is. It's always right there. If you got 5 minutes to kill, it's like, I'll just go to YouTube or this, throw the song on, I'm going to kill some time, or put on a podcast, and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, the yin and the yang. I'm with you on that. I do miss the big dynamic of a CD or something that has a very broad dynamic, and you can hear the bass, the vocals, and everything in this wide array of sound, which might be, hopefully, and it'll never die, which I hope it never does, is the live sound. I mean, that's as broad and real as you can get. That's
right. And I guess, with the technology, that it's just a different palette now, all of those, it's not like there's not low sounds and high sounds in a piece that's composed mostly digitally, but music is older than all of that, and music is older even than the music industry, and it's older than recording technology, and we kind of think of music as something you buy or sell or share. Music is as old as communication, and it used to be passed on by oral transmission. It was just taught, you just heard it and you learned the song, and songs changed over time because you taught this person who taught that person, and I think that's always going to be out there, and so that's the fun of getting to know musicians and playing with people, and looking into like traditional music and stuff that is older than vinyl and older than wax, and
it's a part of our culture through the history of time,
right?
And artwork too. I mean, they were doing hieroglyphics and everything before anything that we know, and songs too. I mean, the first guitars were used from intestines for strings, and
right.
It's always been there. There's a thing inside of it, whether it be primitive or not. There's that those notes are always going to be in our heads,
and that's where
and birds themselves know what to do. So
right, where blue notes and stuff came from, because some of those folk instruments were fretless, and so you had that space right between pitches that had a different emotion, and so that's the instrument, and the way you listen and the way you share it shapes the art that gets made.
And all those instruments got passed between countries, from I believe the banjo started in Africa, and obviously drums started there, made their way north to the European countries, over to here. So music has definitely shaped our culture, and well traveled, and art itself too. I'm sure I guess I'm not knowledgeable enough to know how they passed what they do to where we are today, but I'm sure that was a big part of it.
Well, a lot of those traditions are still there. Like Celtic music kind of crossed when the people crossed, and then they switched to a different kind of whiskey, and it became bluegrass and old. They're the same songs, and you listen to a version of it on like fiddle and flute, and it's a Celtic song, and then you listen to it over here, and it's banjo and guitar. But the progression of it is still, the chord progression is still the same. That's I didn't think about that. Murder ballads and stuff, like the old English songs, that kind of turned into like the banjo murder ballads and stuff, and some of that folk stuff that ends up being Johnny Cash songs and stuff, but they're really 500-year-old songs.
It's true. I neglected to remember that. But you're right. It's been an inspiration all the way down, and sharing information.
Right.
No doubt. I think we've had a pretty damn good conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. We'll just do it again. Next time we're not going to talk when you show up.
Okay.
You're going to come in here and play. We're going to sit down and start talking, because we must have the conversation on the porch as it's been done with everybody. I promise one day I'll get the cameras out on the porch, and that'll take care of the whole problem. We just stand out there and shoot the shit.
Then you got to really selectively make a edited broadcast version.
I'll just put it on their full length. The only thing I'm going to do is edit out the cars driving by. That's the only part, because there's just too much background noise. We got to get rid of that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for having me.
Anytime. Do you have a website, or is it all on Facebook?
Oh, right. I guess I should. ChristopherCarithers.com. So just my full name with nothing in between. ChristopherCarithers.com.
Okay.
Is where I have some things. Had a album from last year called Autobiography of the Thief. Of a Thief. You can find that on anywhere, iTunes and Spotify and stuff like that. Okay. Or you can, if you look at if you get it from Bandcamp or CD Baby, that money gets straight to me, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And then there's hopefully by next year, my band Fellow Travelers will get into the studio, and some of the songs, like the ones that I played tonight, you get to hear the whole band version of.
Okay, so you have other artists on that too, and drummer, bass, all that. Oh, good, man. That's gonna be cool.
And then, and I also I play guitar with the Dirty Mojo Blues Band, and we have a record that we're part of the way finished with, and should be out around January, around the new year.
Yep.
So keep an eye out for that. So.
Definitely. Like I said, Sean was just on. Like, we're gonna check him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, it's been fun, man. We're gonna do it again.
Yeah.
Like I said, next time, no talking.
Okay.
We'll
right.
come on the couch and talk.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, man.
Yeah.
Good night.